Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Next. I am your host, Mike Walker, and today we're going to be talking about Hispanic Heritage Month. And with us, we've got Betsabe Botaitis. And yes, you might be asking yourself, what's this Greek person here talking about? Actually, that's her married name. She's actually a immigrant from Mexico. And she's going to talk to us about her humble beginnings as a bank teller to rising through the ranks and going into innovation of all places and being a co-founder and CEO of a company to being a CFO in a major financial services institution to right now working for a high potential company as their chief financial officer. And so we're going to talk to her today about her journey as an immigrant coming to the United States. What were some of her challenges? How did she overcome those challenges? And some practical advice for all of you. Now, like with all of our episodes, all the show notes and links will be provided on vnextpod.com. That's vnextpod.com. Now, let's go ahead and jump into it. Betsabe, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Mike. Thank you for inviting me to be in the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, and we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and we've known each other for multiple years, and
Yeah.
we've done lots of great stuff in the blockchain world, but thought it'd be good for us to hop on and talk about this. And actually, it wasn't even my idea, but I'm going to take credit for it. What the heck? But yeah, maybe if you could for our listeners, because while we know each other, our listeners don't know who you are. So maybe tell us who you are, where you work, what's your role, and all that good stuff.
I'm more than happy. And well, thank you for going along with the idea of celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. It's very important, especially this year. Okay, so who I am, I'm an immigrant, a Mexican immigrant. I immigrated to the United States when I was 24 years, and I'm gonna disclose my age, so 16 years ago. Yeah, 2040. The big 40. Um, and I started my career in banking since I was super, super young. I don't know, it is nice to say, but I started as a teller at Citibank Mexico when I was a teenager. And then I just somehow fell in love with the system, the banking system, because it's the only thing I had in front of me. I didn't have any vision of technology. I didn't know what startups were. I mean, besides, I know my father a lawyer, my mother a teacher, didn't see anything else. And I somehow going to banks and having a really struggle with poverty and the Mexican crisis in 1994 when my family lost everything and we needed to go to the bank. And when we were going into the bank and we were like heavy hard and we need to make payments and we didn't have money and everybody looked so pretty and nice and suits and like, wow, that's where I want to work. It represents wealth. It represents safety nets. Who, the little I knew then. So I started my career in banking super young, as I already said, and then I just grow my career there.
Now you
Because
can't tease us.
whenever,
You're saying super young. What does that mean exactly, Betsabe?
yeah, it's a teenager, like around 15.
Okay, okay,
15 years old, teller. Yeah. Of course, I needed to get a specific permit from my parents to start working there.
of course.
Yeah. So then I was studying and going to school at the same time and decided to come to the United States. And I came to the United States to pursue higher education. And it was really until I came to the United States when I was like, wow, what does that startup mean? What is IPO? What is all this? Who's Google? I remember thinking about all that. I felt like I grew up in, even though I was living in the second largest city of Mexico at the time, technology, internet, laptop, I didn't have access to it. Like my
Right.
first laptop was when I moved to the United States 16
And,
years ago.
and what year was this, or approximately?
2004.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with phone in my house. I needed to walk like 3 blocks away from my house to go to one of those pay phones. So
Right.
interesting. Yeah. So that's about my beginnings, where I come from. Come from very humble beginnings. Then once I arrived in the United States, I was able to continue my path, my career path on on banking, and then I studied a little bit an asset management firm. But at the core, having this experience in Latin America and Mexico, I really had this crazy idea that somehow everything I heard, everything I saw, technology can help the people that we consider being poor, but they really are just underserved. And at the time, I decided to return to Citigroup, which is an institution that opened the doors for me early on in my career. Then I returned to Citigroup to work on the community development and financial inclusion group. And at the time, we were talking about financial inclusion and innovating projects on fintech. And I remember talking to my friends, and they were like, "What is that?" No one knew. Now everyone knows about financial inclusion, inclusive markets, inclusive economies.
Right.
And a lot of the work that we did is in creating programs and projects. And since then, it was this boom on fintech. Now we have the lending clubs of the world. We have a firm. We have all the BNPL space that is booming. Why? Because generations are changing, and the innovation on fintech is really how do we better serve specific needs of specific generations and demographics? How do we leverage technology to prevent from people to get in more in debt and never get out of it? How do we leverage machine learning to use better underwriting decisions,
Right.
and AI to do better collections, and robotic process automation to reduce operation head and overhead expenses and pass on the savings to the consumer? Because I mean, as much as we may complain about banks, we need banks. We need
Yeah.
debit cards, credit cards. I mean, we cannot operate with it. I mean, we all have houses, we have payments to do, so it's absolutely necessary. So how do we make it better and leverage technology for it?
Well, I mean, let's face it. I mean, me putting my money under my mattress. Those darn kids. They come in. They. They're going to do their own depositing and withdrawals. Actually, no deposits. It's all withdrawals. So
Withdrawals,
so so that's not going to work. So I need some sort of institution that's going to keep them at bay.
yeah, and no interest bearing. Yes,
Right.
it's your lower back pain on the hard mattress.
Yeah, and I vaguely remember back in those days. I started, kind of like you. I started my career in financial services, at least one of the industries, and I remember during that time because I worked largely in IT solutions for the consumer mortgage area, and anti-predatory lending was one of the regulations that we needed to make sure that we addressed, and make sure we're not going after specific groups, and taking them for a ride and all that. So people complain about some of these regulations, but they're actually there for a reason, and usually that reason is usually a pretty good reason.
Yep, consumer protection. There is a lot of good reasons for it.
Right.
Hmm. So, and I remember having this conversation with you and reaching out and say, hey, what is the new technology in fintech?
Right.
Fintech still needs more and more new technology. There are a few innovations and a few advancements, but still we need more. There is a huge number of population and groups out there that still we don't understand. And I think that that's part of our conversation today. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with that, it is Hispanic Heritage Month, and just in general, um, what does it mean to you as a person? Obviously, everyone can go onto Wikipedia and look it up, but for you, I'm assuming as an immigrant yourself and not growing up here in the United States, it probably means something special to you, and would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. You know, now I work at Uplift. I head the finance department for a BNPL company exclusively focused on travel. I really decided to leverage all my career and go into something super, super fun, this travel. I'm sure that we all now, during COVID times, we're missing travel. And I believe we also celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And I was asked the same question, like, what does it mean to you? And I had to really hard think, and also, we did a specific episode of a session with all the team and some of my colleagues that are working remotely from Mexico, that are Mexicans too, and working. They were surprised that we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And it's interesting because you're in Mexico and you're like, oh, I don't know that Hispanic Heritage Month existed.
Right.
And some of our partners from some of the travel partners um, joined the meeting and started explaining about the struggles and what it meant to them. And the reaction of my colleagues was like, we cannot believe that that happens. And what is that? What is that is I personally, as immigrant, I had to go through a lot of struggles, like most people. But really, when you're an immigrant, it's even more difficult, and especially when you're Hispanic. Sometimes it felt like there were some mountains that I cannot climb. It felt like everything difficult. And we know, like I knew I had to work harder and harder. And we can hear from so many people, we have to work 3 times, 4 times. That's reality. It just it goes without saying. If you are Hispanic, you're female, you just have to do it. But one of the things that the reason why I wanted to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month at Uplift, and also I ask you to let's talk about it because it's very important. Is because it was until after 16 years, it was until last December when I was in a Hispanic Leadership Summit at the United Nations in New York last December, when for the first time I felt free to be myself.
Mm.
So the that I was mentioning is how many Hispanics in the United States are very professional, very accomplished and successful, and they cannot be themselves. It's like someone is boxing us in this class
Right.
that even though we are trying to push forward, we cannot move. There's been that in that Hispanic Leadership Summit, I felt that I was for the first time together with a group of people that think alike and they're going through the same struggles. People that they grew up in the United States and they were told, you cannot be Mexican, you cannot be Latino, you can Spanish. Don't ever speak with accents, don't ever speak Spanish. Change your last name because you're not going to be hired in any company, especially in tech. I mean, we know we have a problem of diversity in tech, and it's very, very pronounced, especially on African American and Hispanic demographics,
Yep.
ethnicities. And I literally, I mean, I never cry, and I was crying in the middle of the Leadership Summit because for all these 16 years working in the United States, I felt tired at the end of the day, like trying to change my accent, trying to force what nature, like when you speak Spanish, you use different muscles on your joints. And when
Right.
you speak English, you have to loosen up those joints. And the construct, it was taxing on my body as well on my on my psyche, on my mental emotions. And it was until that point that we were preparing and planning for Hispanic Heritage Month that I felt I can be me. I can speak with Spanish. I can say out loud, I'm a Mexican immigrant and be proud of it
Right.
because I have my own unique perspectives, experiences. So that's what it means to me. To me, Hispanic Heritage Month means freedom, the opportunity to be yourself, the opportunity to let go of any conceived biases, especially the ones that you impose on your own, like the ones on my ex.
No, it makes
So
a ton of sense, and thank you for sharing that because that's one. It's deeply personal, and it's your story. But also, I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people because as you said, uh, in the tech community specifically, and that's the majority of the audience that are probably listening to this podcast is that is a big minority group within the
mm-hmm.
tech world, and let's face it, whether you're in the tech industry or not, every industry is a tech industry at this point.
Hmm.
There's
Yep.
no company on this planet that can survive without technology. So us even trying to kid ourselves and try to divorce ourselves from that is just silly. So
Indeed.
I really do appreciate the honesty and just your willingness to open up and share those stories because I think they're important stories.
Thank you. Yeah.
S- So, for those that are not familiar, this is Hispanic Heritage Month, and it's kind of a different type of situation because it's not from the 1st to the 30th or 31st.
Yeah.
It goes from the 15th of,
The
of September
September.
to the 15th of October. So, I guess people are just trying to keep us on our toes or something. I don't know. But
The people is trying to confuse you.
right, exactly.
It's very confusing. Okay, so well, Hispanic Heritage Month was actually started as a Hispanic Heritage Week in 1968. Was actually enacted by Congress, and it was to celebrate the contributions of Hispanic Americans in art and culture in the United States. We have so many very great contributions that you may not know. People that maybe listen to us may not know that they were actually Latinos that created those great products. And and in 1988, it was moved to let's do it a month, let's celebrate it. And I personally was introduced to it when I was working in Citigroup. I mean, I didn't know, I didn't hear about it until I was working in Citigroup in going to New York, where our headquarters was. Okay, so it was Latino, Hispanic Heritage Month, but it was a very small celebration, very small move in comparison to what it is today,
Yeah.
this month. And the reason that is from September 15 to October 15 is because really coincides with the independence of many Latino countries. For example, the independence of Mexico is not Cinco de Mayo. It is in September 16. For those that thought that Cinco de Mayo is September
Well,
16.
that's like
No.
saying the Irish Independence Day is St. Patrick's Day, right?
Okay. Yeah. So Cinco de Mayo is opportunity to drink some nice beers, but some nice
Right.
tequila, but it's not independence. So Mexico Independence Day is September 15. We have Bolivia. We have between the 15, the 16, the 17, Guatemala, Bolivia,
Chile
Argentina,
is the
Chile,
18th. Yeah.
the 18th. Yeah, and then we move it all the way to October 15 because October 12th is El Día de la Raza, is the day of Columbus when South America was found. So it was this put it together. Okay, let's celebrate all together. So it's very symbolic for all Latinos. And you may think like, what is Latino? Who's Hispanic? I mean, are Brazilians Hispanics? Are Spanish Hispanics? Are Mexican, Guatemalans? Are we all? So that's the beauty of what's happening right now with this new movement. We are all coming together for the first time to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month together, from Brazilians to Argentinians to um, Costa Ricans, Salvadoreños, Peruvians, Mexicans, all together.
Yeah,
And
that's really cool. And and actually, I'd mentioned Chile because the only reason really why I knew that kind of off the top of my head is I was in Chile during that time. I was like, oh, okay,
oh,
this is great.
that's
Um,
good.
but yeah, so for those that are listening, we hear a lot of different terms, and it's just like anything in our world, right? And it's good to kind of have a good grounding on what some of these mean. So like when someone says Latino or Hispanic, or Latinx, what do some of these terms mean, and how should they be used in the right context?
It's an excellent question. We can use the dictionary to define each of them, or we can use wiki as you said, but let's not use that. I think that over time is how as a group we want to be identified. And in this Hispanic leadership conference, we had a survey exactly of how we want to be identified. Or how do you identify them on? So there are some biases or negative connotations to Hispanic. The time that Chicanos, so people couldn't be called, like you couldn't be fluent in Spanish, you didn't feel comfortable. So the most recent survey shows that people from descendants of Latino countries, they feel more comfortable with the term Latinx.
Mm,
I personally, it's so difficult for me to call I'm a Latinx. I mean, for me, I'm a Latina
right.
or I'm a Hispanic. Like, I don't, I can identify easily both words, but for me, Latinx is difficult. But the newer generations wants to be identified with Latinx.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, is there an element of this also that in certain areas in South America that they want to be called one term versus another based on association with Spain? Is that a thing?
I think that there is a thing, but I don't know really.
Right.
Because in my mindset, I mean, we speak Spanish, and I know that Spanish is different. Like Mexican Spanish is different from Argentinian or for Guatemala, and still among our Latino South America groups, we are divided. But coming back to what Heritage Month, Hispanic Heritage Month is trying to do is to unite us and make us stronger, like united we're stronger, like together we're stronger. And in the United States, what we're trying to do really is that it doesn't matter where we come from. We are Latinos, Hispanics, together we're stronger.
Right.
And we are trying to break those bubbles, like sometimes those silos and bubbles that we were working on. Because yeah, there is this concept of, oh, Mexicans do not work with Guatemalans or Salvadoreños, and we're different. But in reality, when we look at these little silos, we're so small populations that together we represent over 60 million of population in the United States. That's huge. I mean, we would put it on numbers of or per capita or persons in power. In 2017, the last statistics that we have the last that we can really trust, it represented 1 trillion on
Wow.
persons with power. I mean, that's a huge population that we are getting married, having kids. We're growing rapidly.
Yeah, that's a few people, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just a few people.
So, this podcast is, focused on the innovation side of the house. So, we
Mhm.
talk a lot about emerging technologies and best practices. And, what I thought be interesting for us to talk about is kind of the blending of diversity and, Hispanic Heritage Month and the because everyone innovates. So, with blending that together with innovation. And so, in your mind, what do you see as the opportunity for Hispanics to get more involved in innovation broadly?
I think Hispanics, we are entrepreneurs by heart. We really, that's how we operate, especially those are immigrants. We have to be very creative on how we reach our goals. Um, how do we accomplish specific milestones in our careers and our lives? It's not the same path that a person that was born in the United States. Those are second and third generation immigrants. They have the experience of seeing their parents or their grandparents going through that very innovative way of doing things.
Right.
Um, so it is really like in our blood. It is part of how we think because that's what we are exposed to. We have to be creative. And actually, there is a growing number of very educated college graduates that they are moving from Latin America into the United States. So, and they are the ones, it was like in 2010, it was up to 36% of the adults, Hispanic adults below 25, that they were college educated moving from other countries to opening startups. So how do Hispanics get involved is by opening startups and by identifying needs on their specific communities, on specific markets. I mean, in my world of fintech,
Hmm.
we can see really good ideas in great companies like Opportune. Opportune is a digital lending that just focuses on the Hispanic market, and it's a private company, a public company. My apologies. Um, we see it on Uplift. How many that we need to have more and more Hispanics and Latinos being part of the DNA because those that's the market that we are serving. People
Right.
that want to get easy access on all consumers, like all companies are now serving a huge population as Hispanic. And what do we want? We want more, to have access in mobile. Many people may be perfectly English speaker, but they may want to do it in Spanish. There may be some language barriers from older generations, but that doesn't mean that they are not credit worthiness. They may have a lot of money underneath their mattress and
Because
very
that's where you put your
loyal.
money, under the
Exactly.
mattress.
Under the mattress. And the values of the Hispanics is about someone treats me well, someone gives me an opportunity. I will never defraud that. It doesn't matter that what I see is a screen, but loyalty, honesty, and humility. Those are so important for this group, this population. So then, how do we get involved in innovation? It's really understanding the market, really understanding the people serving and creating the right products and the right services, the right systems to serve them. From how do we answer a call? How do we answer the text? I mean, believe me, if a Hispanic person sends a text to a chat, they're going to be a lot easier if you get buenos dias, buenas tardes, thank you, gracias.
Right.
Then what do you want?
Well, and just when you talked about the buying power and population numbers, I mean, there are unique scenarios and perspectives that are just being left on the table if you don't bring folks from this community into the innovation process. You could be missing something really, really big. And
Mhm,
when we talk about innovation, we talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about bringing together crazy ideas, audacious ideas,
mhm.
off the wall ideas. And as part of that process, don't you want to include these folks that may not have grown up in the same area as you, but can relate to uh, a whole segment of the population that you might not be able to relate to? I think that's just invaluable.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and I think that a lot of companies are gonna miss out opportunities, as you said, if they don't really open their eyes and realize this is a very important group that we need to start listening and recognize we are stronger together. Because I said this year there has been a very big movement on uniting Hispanics. This is the first year in 16 years that I've been living in the United States that all of us come together to celebrate Hispanics, to encourage each other, to understand who is leaders on their professions and in technology. I mean, coming from Silicon Valley, I am happily surprised of so many amazing Hispanics leading in top companies from Airbnb, from Google, from Facebook, from you name it, all amazing companies, founders of startups. They're making a huge difference, and we are just learning about them. Because
Right.
before we were just hidden, we didn't want to say that. We were so divided that it didn't make sense, but now it does. And about blockchain, I mean, the number one adopters of blockchain and cryptocurrency are Hispanics. That's how we're doing transfers. That's how we're making payments. That's why we feel comfortable. We adopt technology a lot faster.
See, there you go.
Mhm.
Innovators.
Innovators.
And with that innovative spirit, you know, do you find that there are particular industries that Hispanics have been more successful or been more influential in?
You know, if I go back to history, it was very interesting that I learned also in this Hispanic Heritage Month that some of the greatest technologies that we use, for example, the technology to have color in TV, and the first technology to that NASA used to go to the moon and have video imaging, that was done by a Hispanic. It was
Oh,
done by a guy called Guillermo Gonzalez Camarena. He plays originally from Mexico, my home, Guadalajara, my hometown, the city I was born. And I just didn't know that. Like,
wow. I didn't
like
know
the,
that
the
either.
core of color TV, like the pixels and everything. He's a Hispanic, and I mean, how many people know? Because of him, NASA had the first Voyager mission in 1979 to take
Wow,
pictures, video of Jupiter.
that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Then something that I'm personally attached with is the special artificial bubbles for extreme premature kids. So this, my dad was born premature, and I had experience to spend a lot of time in the hospital. Thank God she's doing wonderful and she's very healthy. But I mean, she grew in a bubble. I saw her grow through a glass in a bubble, and she only survived because of that technology. Also creative, a Peruvian lady called Claudia Castillo Lebano.
Hmm.
So by that, it wouldn't be alive without the technology of Claudia. Sorry.
Wow. That
Then, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, no. I mean that's super cool, and I think you were going to go on and talk a little bit about if there are any other specific areas you think that Hispanics have had their fingerprints on that have provided some real change, like the color TV or the bubbles that you're talking about. Which, by the way, I've got twins, and my twin boys probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those bubbles as well. So I'm right there
Exactly.
with you.
Exactly. And there's so many things, but another one that I was like, wow, this how many lives is saving with technology. The first um, artificial heart, implant of an artificial heart.
Hmm.
So, and I can go on and on and on. So many things from semiconductors or the rotary engine, and even how do we open the corkscrew, the corkscrew? How many of us drink wine?
Let's get to the important stuff. The
Yeah,
corkscrew.
the
That's the
corkscrew.
important stuff here.
Exactly.
Um,
I
so
mean, all those comes from his people, Hispanic. Like I when I start reading, like wow,
yeah, it
we
is
have
super
here so many
surprising.
things that we all of us use. Yeah.
Yeah, when you kind of look back and some of the things that we kind of take for granted,
Hmm.
and actually look back and we're like, oh wow, yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yes.
Now, um, so that's the past. So let's move from the
Step
past. Now let's
forward.
go to the future.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe even skipping some of the present. So, do you think here over the next, I don't know, 3, 5, 10 years, do you see that there's any particular areas that you think that Hispanics could add? Uh, I don't want to say value, but impact based on their perspective. And granted, you know, every human being on the planet can impact all particular industries. But um, as far as you're concerned, are there specific areas that you think that, based on whether it be living situation, economic status, culture, uh, do you think that there are specific areas that Hispanics could innovate?
Well, I think that because Hispanics can innovate in any area that there is a problem to be solved.
Yes, and oh, by the way, yeah, I gave you a completely, a loaded question there. Like,
Exactly, you did. Like,
so let's talk about world peace. What are you going to do
please,
about that?
yeah, let's have home. Yeah, let's talk about please. Okay. Now, I think that definitely, as I mentioned before, because we have this DNA, like we are entrepreneurs by heart, and because many of us have gone through struggles, the best way to innovate is when you actually understand the problem by core, or you immerse into the problem. So I mean, if we turn our eyes or faces to what's happening in Latin America, I'm just gonna point to Guadalajara, that is considered the Silicon Valley of Mexico. I mean, the innovation on self-driving cars, it is, I would say, slightly advanced here than here. Is fantastic. So why? Because there is a problem of so many deaths on road and problems and traffic and so on. So they are solving a problem: the traffic, the contamination, the pollution. Coming back to United States, I mean, there is amazing people leading Intel companies, but also new startups being built. Like there's new startups on a wonderful, I'm forgetting her name, Paola. She's doing a lot of drones for cybersecurity for actually from Pentagon. She's from Brazil. She's building a lot of that innovation for security. So we have a lot of people from Argentina. We have great companies like uh, Auth0 and Globant, the Argentinian company that are solving real problems in technology, like Auth0 on the blockchain world. How do you connect your different identities? And you have that interface that make it super easy to connect in a way that you don't have to download your 100 digits of and memorize them and have your private key, public key, and all the stuff. Like it's really complex. So they are solving real problems. And like that, I can go on and on from how do you solve problems of malnutrition
Yeah.
and food? How do you preserve food better in areas that are super hot? How do you have technology that actually prevent kids from getting dengue, which is the Malaysia mosquito bites that they get sick, like things like that. Like in every single aspect, when there is a point of pain, I see Latinos innovating.
Right.
One of the things, as I mentioned, that I particularly focus on is in the financial inclusion, on the inclusivity of um, of Latinos into the banking system, the ability to transfer money. I mean, we love our family, and it's part of who we are. I mean, I still send money to my family. And how do I do it? Do I do it through blockchain? I have to say that I do everything through blockchain, and of course, come from blockchain.
Of course, and what's
Of
funny
course.
is yeah, I don't know if it's just me when people are talking to me and they and the conversation just gravitates towards that, but uh,
Because we're
blockchain
talking to
comes
you
up
and
like
like
all the time.
all the time. Yeah.
And I promise
I
this
don't know
isn't
why.
scripted. We didn't rehearse this. This is that didn't happen. It's just it's there. It's in the background, and people are using it. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think you're right, and we didn't quite solve world hunger, but I think that's okay. Now,
We need more Hispanics
right? Yeah,
in the right positions and given the right opportunity
let's
because
talk
we
about
can.
that. So,
Yeah.
you talked about how you have been, you started from very humble beginnings.
Hmm.
You worked your way up the ladder, and you've been in very senior positions. You've been a co-founder of a company. You've been in several executive positions in the traditional banking world. You're now a very very senior financial person at not quite a startup, but somewhere in that kind of middle echelon
Yeah.
there.
A
Um,
hyper growth company. Mhm.
So as part of that, I'm wondering, uh, you probably got a ton of really good life lessons on, you know, how to approach a technology career, and especially one in which you've been extremely active in the technology world. You've been an innovator, obviously, by starting companies and really diving deep into these emerging technologies. It'd probably be good, and we'd be remiss if we didn't spend a few minutes talking about, and maybe you'll blush a little bit, but that's okay. Talking about some of your
Okay.
piece of advice to being successful as a Latin American person, being successful, and innovating and driving for success.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, innovation was not my path. As I said, I was a banker since 15 years old, and it was on my heart. And I mean, this is not a commercial, but I owe a lot to Citigroup because it gave me the opportunity. Despite the fact that they see it as a big bank, it's a wonderful bank to be work, and it gave me the opportunities in Mexico and as well in the United States. Um, but it was clearly not my path. But I saw and I was attentive of the needs of others. And I was in tune with my own needs and my own pain. Like sometimes we have pain and we have um, needs, but how do you channel those? Do you channel them for good, or do you channel it for anger and say, "Oh, poor me"? I never went to the "oh, poor me" situation. I always went into, how can I channel these to prevent others from going through this? How can I help someone to I mean, when I came to the United States, I didn't know even how to open a bank account. I mean, my parents never had a checking account. So how would I understand that if I didn't grow up with that? My mom until today doesn't use computers. I'm teaching how to use smartphones.
Don't worry, my
And
mom doesn't know how to use one either, and she
uh,
she grew up here, so
good.
she's not too far behind. Or to make you feel a little bit better.
Okay, good, good, good. I feel better now. So then it's really like, how do you channel the energy and how do you perceive the world and you within that world? So I perceive my world as being, I never seen difference. Yes, I knew it. As I said, I knew that I had to work harder, but it went, it was, it go without saying. It went without saying. I just need to do it. But I have this huge desire to help others. And the, and I think that is always this humility of listen to advice and reaching out for help. One of the things, if I have to look back, and I think that really helped me, is that I always ask for help.
Mm.
I never pretend to know what I didn't know. And I was perhaps too humble sometimes, and not recognizing what I knew also. That's the thing perhaps I could have changed. To be a little bit more secure on myself and build my strength. But as I said, my own biases of how I perceive my feelings on my accent is what held me back many times. But I think that one of the things that is super important for anyone that wants to get into technology is really being humble, to always accept feedback, implement that feedback, take what is important, always ask for question, always ask for ideas, for opinions, for help. If you have ideas, just run it from people. Like brainstorm with people. Don't ever assume that people will 100% understand your ideas and those ideas are absolutely correct, because we together, the diversity of thought, the diversity of experience, the diversity of ethnicity, all that is so powerful. And I think that that's one of the things I recognized earlier in my career, asking questions. When I work with my teams, it is about, how can we solve these problems together? How can we figure it out together? I always try to hire people that are a lot smarter than me, exactly because of that, because it is, how can we, in from different experiences, and I associate with people that from very different backgrounds, and very in a very open way, like, how can we improve together? How can I learn from your experience? And that's super important. There are times that in technology I felt like the door was closed for me,
Mm.
and
That is incredibly insightful, and there was just so many kind of nuggets there that I want to try to kind of revisit a little bit. One, you had said, you always try to hire people that are smarter than you. And I think that that's a sign of someone that's very comfortable in the skin that they're in, someone that appreciates and knows that the value is not necessarily about you and hoarding all the information or experience, but it's about bringing others in. And I think the macro point there is just that it's whether it is knowledge or um, race, it's bring in other folks to gain those other perspectives, because there's no way that you can be an expert in everything, even if you are a specialist in a field. I just had this conversation earlier today.
yeah.
You've got a set of experiences that are unique to you, and
Mhm.
likewise, if you come from a specific culture, you've got those experiences, and that's valuable. It's extremely valuable to be able to share that, even if you weren't anticipating going to address that particular market, but just appreciating and understanding that there are people out there that are expecting things in a certain way. It provides an enormous amount of value.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that my career to innovation was an untypical path. I really follow an untypical path in everything way, but particularly to innovation. And like that, I really want to encourage other people to see you don't need to have a innovation degree, a technology degree early
Right.
on. Non-typical, diverse range of experiences could be so valuable in your organizations in any way possible. And that is exciting because sometimes we will be surprised of what we can do together when we have that range of experiences. Super exciting. I value that, and I can say that it was until I joined Uplift that I felt that that skill set was valued.
Right.
When I had my first interview, and they said, "Well, you have this range of experience, you can do so many things," and I was like, "Yeah, that's true. I can do all these different things." And most companies are like, "No, you have way too much experience. You should not be part of it. You just need to be don't focus on this." And he's like, "No, that's not good." And I felt so happy and valued because of that. And that's the same way that I value my colleagues. Yes, we have our superpowers, and it happens that my superpowers are more on the finance side. Um, and I'm just borrowing from one of my colleagues. He used that expression: "Your superpowers are always in finance." And I do agree, but it doesn't prevent me from helping and collaborating in other areas that are super important. And that's part of innovation. Innovation is not just a product that you build and you put in your hand. It is about how do you create new services, processes on the back end. How do you really get a very redundant, rudimentary, risky process, and you bring that innovation. A lot of the things that I'm implementing in my finance group, it is that innovative thought.
Well, as you're talking about your passion, I'm just thinking about, all the financial modeling that I can just outsource to you, Betsabe. So, all you people that are listening that may be future clients of mine, that Monte Carlo financial simulation, it didn't come from Betsabe. It came from me. But really,
Exactly.
it came
As
from
I said, I
Betsabe.
have other people that work with me and they inspired at me.
Yeah, so I have no qualms about it. I am perfectly fine outsourcing all my super detailed financial modeling and crazy Excel spreadsheets right on over to you, Betsabe.
By all means, happy to do it. Well,
So
Mike, I need to wrap it up so I can jump to the next meeting. But I want to just thank you so much. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about Hispanic Heritage Month and really share a little bit about me.
likewise, thanks, Betsabe.
Thank you.